Thank you, Giovanni, for having me on the show. My name is Erik Stel. Online, you can find me as Erik on Bike as well. So that would be my GitHub account, and on some like Slack Spaces or Discord, you'll find me as Erik on Bike or Erik Stel. I'm the creator of CodeParadise, and I'm going to demonstrate and explain some of the inner workings of CodeParadise in this presentation, this meeting. And I think the idea is to have a presentation first, and then afterwards we'll have a discussion about well, the things we've seen and what might be interesting. And just to show that CodeParadise is there, I'm already running CodeParadise. What you see here, what you already might have seen, is that this is, and I have to switch it back. So this is a browser showing my application, my CodeParadise application. And on the left-hand side, there's my Pharo development environment, in which different objects are running. And if I go to my inspector showing the current presentation, I can execute the self next slide. I hope it's visible for everyone. I've chosen a bigger font, so it's, I hope it's visible even on the recording. And if I'm executing next slide, my page in the browser will move on to my next slide. So here you have the first visual of running Smalltalk in the browser. And well, this is part of my talk. It's going to be about CodeParadise. And I'll give an introduction what it means, because you might have read some about it, but I'll give some explanation there. I'll give some design decisions. I'll do that in relation to the technologies that come from that. And then I will move on to what I think are some of the possibilities or potential of these technologies, because I think that's what a number of you as participants have mentioned interest in. And then I think it's good time to move on to the discussion, and we'll have a look what other things you have in mind, and share some ideas there. Okay, so introduction. CodeParadise is a cloud platform to be for a development environment, based on the object-oriented principles within a Smalltalk environment. It is aimed primarily at children, meaning the tone of voice, the explanations, the examples will be more focused towards children than towards adults, but anyone can use it. I'm not prohibiting the usage. And it's an environment that is probably going to be used after some initial experience has been gathered with environments like Scratch or Blockly. And if you have experience with HTML and cascading style sheets, that would be beneficial as well, as kids, as the newcomers. Since Smalltalk itself is not a visual programming language, proficiency in English is very welcome as well, of course. It's, I think, even a necessity. So why create this platform for Smalltalk and object-oriented programming? Well, first of all, I've been a programmer and used Smalltalk, and that period of time, it was, well, the best fun, the most beautiful things we created with Smalltalk. So then I saw you here. Thank you so very much, because you were one of the creators, of course, of the Smalltalk language. A lot of smiles on my face are I owe to you. Thank you so very much. I really love working with Smalltalk, and nowadays as a consultant, I would love to say, let's use Smalltalk in this situation. But the thing is, the number of resources, at least here in the Netherlands, is limited. So most IT shops will not use Smalltalk, and I can't make them. I can't say, yeah, you should use Smalltalk. They'll be using Java, C#, Clojure, Haskell, Python, JavaScript, whatnot, but not Smalltalk. So I don't think I can change that. Well, maybe, just maybe. The thing is, if I can get the new generation of coders really hooked onto Smalltalk, if I can make an environment which they're gonna love, maybe, just maybe, they'll go and go up to their IT shop and say, I want to do this project, but only if I'm going to use Smalltalk. And if that's not going to happen, they might set up their own IT shop and use Smalltalk for their next project. So that's my little ambitious goal here, my little life project. So that's one side of why I'm creating CodeParadise. The other stems from the inspiration gotten from the Dynabook vision by Alan Kay and his peers. Then, if you haven't read it, what this vision is, please do. It's I think pretty interesting. It's the idea of having a book-like device for kids, which they can use to code and code to be creative, like create paintings or make poetry, make music, and which you also can use for educational purposes. So like use the simulation power of computers and programming to learn things. These ideas come from people like Seymour Papert and Jean Piaget, and I really relate to those ideas. And so that's another reason for creating CodeParadise. It doesn't really have to be a development environment per se. It is also a platform for being creative. So I hope you're gonna get interested, or maybe you're already interested, but I hope you're gonna be interested. Participate, not only here, but also maybe in the future on this platform. It's all open source what I'm doing, and it's fun for free. I would say, do use it at your own risk at the moment. I mean, it's not ready for business. So if you're gonna use it there, be careful. And actually, I really hope that the risk is more in that it's addictive to participate here and do things. And I think most of you will already be addicted to Smalltalk, so that wouldn't be a big thing. Okay, I'm going to talk a bit about the design decisions, but in relation to the technology in use. And I think there are two major things in, I'm getting my notes here, two major things in design decisions. The first being, I want it to be something that runs in your browser. Because if I want to have kids involved, they should be able to sort of just start up their browser and be using it. They shouldn't be installing all kinds of applications before running any application. And the second being, it should be Smalltalk only. Because I want to, if you want to learn a language, you don't want to have to learn a second language as well. So there shouldn't be any JavaScript. And that's a bit of a thing, because my first choice was I want to run in the browser, and running in the browser without JavaScript, well, that's a thingy. But luckily there's a solution there. And there are many solutions for certain problems. I'm going to talk about the things I have chosen. If it's interesting, we could use some of the discussion to talk about alternatives, but I will not explain the things I haven't chosen, although I might mention why I've chosen things here. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some of the technology in use. And these four elements I'm going to explain and demonstrate. It's starting with Squeak.js. I heard Vanessa is unfortunately not present. Also a big OU to Vanessa for creating this beautiful virtual machine. Squeak.js, for those who don't know it, is a Smalltalk virtual machine written in JavaScript. It can run inside your browser, and it can run, well, almost any Smalltalk image from Pharo, Squeak, or QS. It will actually run the full image. So if you get a browser open and an inspector, and you save your Smalltalk image and then drag and drop it into the Squeak.js demo page, it will open up as you left it, and it will run. It's amazingly stable and fast. It's really nice. Squeak.js can be run in two modes. One is the head full mode, as I explained just now, but you can also run it in a headless mode, which means it will run the full Smalltalk code, but there isn't any display, so it will not bit onto a canvas. And I'm using the second mode, the headless mode, and I've created a number of plugins. These have to be created in JavaScript, by the way, but that's something that the developers won't use or see. They will use but not see. And the plugins I've created will do DOM manipulation, they will do event handling, communication, and such. And Smalltalk images running inside the browser can make use of that. So they can, well, manipulate the DOM. As you can see right now, you see a screen with a slide, and this slide is created by manipulating the DOM. And that's what the Smalltalk code is doing. So, well, for me, it feels a bit like finally you have something like, look, mom, no JavaScript, because that's always been a thing, and it's not necessary anymore. So I'd like to show that to you. Be careful with, all right. Here you see, there's, it's very small font here. So it says it's Squeak running the interpreter 0.99. It's initializing the JIT, so it has a just-in-time compiler as well. And well, it's running really fast. It's a really nice application. I'm going to show more in a moment. So, okay, I've got Smalltalk running in my browser. That's the first and I think a very important step. Because I won't explain the alternatives I've used, but I tried quite a few. And JavaScript would always shine through. It's very difficult to create an environment in which Smalltalk is kind of the only thing there. So if an error would occur, often other solutions will really show that's a JavaScript thing. And Squeak is so solid that hardly, if ever, happens. So the second part is, okay, I've got this image running inside my browser, but in a live environment, I want to be able to let it do things and react to things. How does that work? It's inside my browser. So I created a remote environment, and a remote environment, that's Smalltalk code that is responsible for installing code in a client environment and executing code there. So I have a number of classes surrounding the server environment and the client environment. And obviously the browser will be your client environment, and the server environment will, well, currently my Pharo development environment. And the server environment will send classes and methods. And you have to think here that will be compiled methods. So there's no source code, but just the bytecode and all the definitions of the class and the methods will be sent to a client environment, which will install this bytecode, classes, and everything involved there. And the server can send messages, like sending messages to objects. It will send messages to objects in the client side, which will get executed there. The client will not respond. It will just receive these and do its thing. But if there's events that are relevant, it will make an announcement. An announcement is it's in Pharo. I don't think it's in Squeak, and it's not in QS. Is a eventing kind of mechanism from Visualworks. I think it originated. It's real objects containing relevant information inside an announcement, and that gets sent to the server environment, and it can decide what to do with the information inside the announcement and the type of announcement that it received. By separating this, it's also a means of having a secure environment as well. The client cannot try to install classes or methods on purpose or by accident inside the server environment. It just won't, it can't happen. And it's a nice loose coupling there. Currently, the server and client environment are implemented using WebSockets. I think an obvious way for the browser to communicate is WebSockets for bidirectional communication. And there's some serialization of objects going on. They're turned into bytes. And it helps, for example, to mitigate the problem of 32 and 64-bit images. Their words, the size of the words might differ, but the serialization will mitigate that. And the server environment will keep track of the client state. So if a client is client will reload, the server knows the state of the client before reloading and will make sure the client gets back into that state. Do I need to explain? Oh, well, the serialization, you can't serialize things like block closures. Those are really sort of difficult things, unless it's already inside the bytecode of a method. Then you can install it in a client environment, but otherwise you can't. So there's some limitations here. You'll mainly be serializing integers, strings, collections of these things and such. Okay, I'm going to make a little demonstration here, do a little demonstration here. If I'm back at my Pharo development environment on the left-hand side, so that's my server environment, and my Chrome browser on the right-hand side, that's my client environment. And I've opened up an inspector on my server environment, and I'm going to ask the client environment to perform a method. So I'm going to use So I'm going to ask it to perform the alert method, and as an argument, I'm going to give it the hello string. And if I do this message, you will see hello dialog appear. And now I have to. And the same I could do with putting something on the log. That's the crtrace method for creating a trace method. And if I open up my inspector console, there's no message there. And if I run this code, it will immediately show hello. It's tiny again, the font, but you have to trust me if you can't read it. There's hello. If I would send the message nonsense to my client environment, and I would do this message, I immediately get a message back saying that the client environment didn't understand nonsense. So there was a message sent to the client environment. The client environment tried to execute a method, and it said, "Oh, doesn't understand," and it sent back that message to the server, and the server is displaying at the moment an inspector. At some point, this should be a debugger, of course. Okay, well, if it's not there, let's make sure it is there, because it should have been there. I forgot to implement it. So I'm going to go to the client environment. In my development environment, again, on the server side, I'm going to make a new instance method, nonsense, which is going to do an alert and I'm going to save this method. And when I get back to my invocation of nonsense from the server side, now it will be possible to execute that method. So now you see the nonsense I say message I created, that's there. And if I reload my browser on the right-hand side, and go back and try to send that message again, it will again show the message. So it retained, the server side retained the client state and still is able to perform the message nonsense. Okay, so that's that part. Going back. Here, I think this makes it ready. So I have Smalltalk running in my browser. I can put code behavior inside this image inside the browser. Hey, but where did this initial image come from? Well, this is where Pharo Bootstrap comes in. Pharo Bootstrap is a project in development by Carina Hernandez-Phillips. She couldn't, unfortunately, make it to the meeting. She's keen on helping out if you also want to create Smalltalk images from source code, because that's what Pharo Bootstrap can do. You can give source code and a language definition, and additional some classes in the Pharo Bootstrap image will allow it to create a new Smalltalk image. I don't think it's limited to making Pharo images. You could probably just as well make QS or Squeak images, as long as you provide the relevant source code and some of the initialization code, because it'll need to create a number of instances, like you have to have an active context and a first process, for example, and you'll have to create that in some Smalltalk code. It uses a very interesting mechanism of having multiple images inside the Bootstrap image to create these initial objects, which are then saved in the Smalltalk image. And those Smalltalk images you can run on your regular desktop VM, or, as said before, within Squeak.js. Part of the Pharo Bootstrap repository is Pharo Candle, and Pharo Candle is, I think, a demo for a very small, might I say tiny, Smalltalk image. It doesn't do much, but I think it's in that sense a demo and sort of proof of concept. But for me, that was the ideal starting point to create a tiny image, which did have the number of base classes and would include the client environment. Because from this client environment, I could make sure it would get the additional behavior dynamically for running in the browser. So the Pharo Candle code itself is somewhat awkward in the sense that all the class names are prefixed with PC from Pharo Candle PC. I removed that because I want to be in sync with the regular image. And I've added some features like exception handling and mutexes, the announcements which weren't in. And as said, the client environment. The client environment consists of 15 classes. So the resulting image is only 200 kilobytes in size. That's the full image, and it has around 100 classes and 1500 methods. So that's pretty small. And of course, it doesn't need a compiler, so a lot of additional classes which you normally get within the Smalltalk image because you need a compiler aren't there, and it makes it nice and tiny. I'm gonna switch to, for a moment, this is the Bootstrap image, and here you have a definition, and I've created a definition for CodeParadise, and you'll have to define a number of roles, for example. That's something that you have to define in the language definition. The tiny image doesn't have a proto-object, but just uses objects. Superclass is nil instead of proto-object, what you'll see in many other Smalltalk implementations. And it has, for example, instead of things like byte string, it just has string, and instead of byte symbol, it just has symbol. These are a number of classes which it needs to be able to bootstrap, to be created. So this is typically something you would have to create an initial image. Okay, I did see something pass by in the chat. Is there something, there's a question towards me? I'm gonna look at my second screen for a moment. Okay, I don't think that's a question for me. So this is what I'm using to create tiny images which run inside the browser. Okay. So back to the technologies in use. Smalltalk in the browser, being able to give it commands from the server side, and it's running a really tiny image. But of course, I need something to make it possible to render these presentations, for example. And this is where web components come in. Web components is the W3C standard for creating reusable components. It's sort of like you can create your own HTML tags and add behavior to it. Again, normally this would be JavaScript as behavior, but we can use Smalltalk now. One of the possibilities in web components, because it's not compulsory to use, is to have HTML templates. And the HTML templates in web components are a little bit different than the typical Mustache or React or Jinja kind of templates, in which you have a template and you have your data that gets squashed together, and then you have HTML as output. In web components templates, the data and the HTML template remain separate, and which allows us to change the template without having to disturb the data, and it will just re-render itself with the new template. So I'll show how that looks like. If I go back to my client environment, the server environment, and I have a set of this is a package for the presentation. So a presentation I'm giving here, and it has a model tag with the number of model classes. It has a presenter tag with the number of presenters, and a view tag with the number of view classes. And if I go to the titled slide view, for example, and I go to the class side, here I have a template consisting of HTML, and I can, for example, in the header, there's the title. I can add a prefix to the title, and as soon as I save this, it ends up here in the browser as well. So the template is replaced, but the data remains as it is. The same holds for the styling of this element. I can also, for example, change the styling. I could make the font much smaller, for example. So now you have this little itty bitty font here at the top. Ooh, 100, a bit big. So I can change the template and the styling, and it will take effect immediately. Again, one of these Smalltalk principles of being able to see your changes directly. What I did, and I already showed you a bit, is that I created a model view presenter pattern. What you see in the browser is the view, and only the view will have instances of the view classes. The model and presenter are all running on the server side. The presenter will subscribe to events from the model, of announcements from the model, and based on that decide if the view should be rendered again. And the presenter will render the view by sending it commands, maybe installing new classes or methods if necessary during rendering that view. And in this way, there's no need for the view to know anything about the model. It's a real passive view, if you look at Martin Fowler's explanation. I wanted to say something. Okay, forgot. I probably forgot to say something very important here, but let's just go over and show some details. Presenters, by the way, presenters can have child presenters, and so they might delegate part of their work to other presenters. Okay, let's go back into the development environment. One of the things which we could do is, if we're I'm here at the presentation, sorry. I'm here, the model is the presentation here. And if I change the title, for example, and if you look up here, the title of the tab is called CodeParadise. And once I execute this code, it will say hello again. So I changed the title of the presentation. The presenter listens to the change event and will update the view. It can be bigger changes as well. I can, for example, say, well, I want another slide. So I'm asking the slide deck to add another slide, which will be titled slide, for example. And the title will be extra, and it will have as content, because a titled slide will have a title and content. As a content, I'll just do some text content. And this text content will be read all about it. See if I can close it up real nicely. If I would execute this code, I would add a slide, but it wouldn't show directly. So I'm even going to say to the presenter, go to the slide and then add this slide, because the add slide will answer the slide as well. So it will immediately go to the slide as well. So I'm adding a new slide here. And when I execute it, here we are. We've got a new slide here on the right-hand side, which has this content. All right. An interesting thing might be event handling, because I haven't shown that. Let's go back to this the class here. On the instance side of my title slide, I can create a handler. So let's create a handle pointer move event. And what I want to do is, if I move my mouse towards the title, I would like the title to become bigger. Like, whoa, you're coming towards me, I'm going to make myself bigger. So I'm going to ask, I need a point, of course, because a pointer event has a point. That's where the pointer is. And pointer events are anything with like mouse or a pen or your finger or whatever. And if the point y is less than 300, I'm really getting close to, and if not, just say goodbye. And what I want to do is I want to change the style of my title. And the title is part of a template field. So I'm going to ask myself for the first descendant and matching a certain cascading style sheet selector. And my selector would be, in this case, that slot is title. I want a title slot. And with that DOM element, I want to change its style. And let's say we do the 300 minus point y, so it will be bigger if we are more near. And it shouldn't be too big, so divide it by, and it should at least be 1. Sorry for mumbling in myself here. Okay, so what this code does, because maybe I'm going a bit too fast. In a view, I have access to DOM elements, because a view is actually one of those DOM elements. It's a web component, and a web component is just another tag, and with that, it's a DOM element. So I can ask the DOM element to find descendants, children, which match a certain cascading style sheet selector. This is matching what you would do in JavaScript by saying query select, or in jQuery you would use the dollar operator to select a child. And I'm selecting the child which is the slot for the title, and if I find it, it should add, change the font style and make that into this little thing here. And if you're into cascading style sheets, you know what it means, but it's setting the font size in a relative way. So if I save this method and I move over to the right-hand side and give it focus, and I start moving towards my title, whoa, there it moves. But it moves, but it's limited into this bounding box here. So you know what? If I go back to my style and to the header, no, to yeah, here to the header, there's this overflow. And you know what? I'm gonna temporarily remove that, and I save it again, and I'm back in the browser. Whoa, extra. So I can use event handling to have even more control over how my application reacts and looks like. Those things. So, okay, that's good. Back to, what's the time? Pretty good. Let's head back, web components. There's another element that's not typical web components, but is something useful as well, and that's animations. So you can make animations in using Smalltalk code, and it will also animate multiple items. And if I show some code here, that's rendered in this animation demo class. So this is a view class, which is very specific for a type of animation. And here is the code I want to show. There's this browser animator, and this is a singleton instance, and you can add animations to this. And an animation receives a block which it will execute repeatedly over a period of, in this case, 500 milliseconds, and the animation will start in a delay with a delay of 1,000. And this code executing here is going to set the rotation of the big square. This is the rendering of the single item, big square, and the parameter p, which is given to this block, is a progress parameter which will have a value between 0 and 1, meaning, of course, the start or the end of the animation, and depending on this time. So if I'm just going to make this into a bit longer, 1500 milliseconds, and if I move back, we'll slowly turn now, and both elements will meet at the same time. So this is also a way of adding extra features to the application. Again, not necessarily this is web components, but you can use them inside web components. Okay, now web components, I said, is about reusable components. And a way to show off what that means is the following. Here you have a slide carousel, which has all the slides in my slide deck. And you can see this is the same slide I'm showing. So it's both the full slide as well, this smaller slide. And I can show you the different slides I'm going through. And it will even have the, oh, you see, this was the extra. Read all about it, I just added. And it will also allow you to run the animation inside the small slide window here. So you can use components at different levels. And if I'm back to my development environment, and I forgot, of course, to remove from my template the additional prefix for title. If I remove that again and save it, it will be gone both from this slide window as well as the big slide window. So it updates all these components for us. Beware that I'm not animating all the slides here. That's a lot of cascading style sheet shizzle going on, and that's actually the heavy lifting is in the browser there. I'm not doing it, but I am showing all the different slides, of course. Okay, so back to where we were. All right. So we've got this, the web components, and now I'm able, and this is sort of how far I've come. I'm able to create web applications based on what I think is a solid model of model view presenter, which, of course, that's why I made it in this way. Matches really nice with the client-server model, in which there's only announcements back. So the view will only announce that, for example, a button is clicked or something is done. And it's the presenter that's constantly updating the view if there's anything relevant done in the model, which it subscribes to. So anything interested is announced there. Okay, so that's technologies in use. Then we come back to, well, I think the last element before going into discussion. That's pretty much halfway, going good. What I see as a number of options, and I think that's I think it would be interesting as a starting point for discussion, assuming that I'm right, that these are the things that people are interested in. With this technology, you could create interactive web applications using WebSockets instead of HTTP request response. Makes it more snappy. It could be used with web components, but also just direct DOM manipulation. Both are viable options, I think. What I haven't shown, but is possible, is the sealing of a Smalltalk image. Like if you put code inside this client environment, at some point you could say, I'm cutting the wire between the client and the server, and I'm just using the code that's installed in the client environment at that point in time. And it could still communicate, but then not to add other features to the Smalltalk image, but just to run code. Sealing doesn't work. An issue I haven't really looked into, but the tiny image, if I try to save it, it won't start again. So there's a little thing to get fixed. Another option for this technology might be to create sort of Smalltalk services. These client environments could very well contain service logic that could be run somewhere on the internet on a virtual private server, for example, with a regular virtual machine, or if it's on a cloud platform that has Node.js, it could also run using the Street.js virtual machine. And sort of similar, you can also create Smalltalk applets, pieces of code you can run, for example, on your Raspberry Pi or as little applets on your desktop. So that's some of the ideas I at least have for using it. And for example, my idea of this CodeParadise application is not having one single big image on the server side, but that's going to be probably a number of Smalltalk images. One for the development environment, Smalltalk image for the application being developed, so it doesn't need development environment itself, and maybe some sort of object storage image, which helps for the object persistence, and have them work together. So such a setup is something I envision. And I would like to use, for example, QS. Juan, great work on QS. I love the minimalism of QS. And I can imagine using that kind of image as the basis for like the application image or the development image, really being minimal. Unfortunately, Pharaoh, although I like it as well, I mean, I'm not bashing here, but it's kind of bloated. There's a lot of code in there, and I don't think I use all. Hardly. It's like Word. We don't use all the features of Word. So I think that's a bit of a wrap up for. Oh, hey, Vanessa. I think I see that Vanessa joined.
Yeah, I am. Hey.
Hey.
Hello all.
Hi there. I'm very happy with Squeak.js. I said it's a great stable product, which is awesome for what I'm creating here. So I'm really happy with that. Thank you so very much for creating it and giving it to us.
Well, thank you for all the work you're actually putting into it. So it's growing. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I stop sharing my screen and shall we sort of
yes,
talk about
please go ahead.
or maybe some feedback? I've been talking, but haven't heard anything from your side, and haven't been able to watch. Although I set up a second monitor, haven't been able to see the chat. So
so if you have any question for Erik, any comments, just go ahead and unmute yourself, and hopefully one at a time, please.
Okay, maybe. Okay, I applied the Ethernet protocol and it worked. I was the first to grab the token. You only talked about and showed the technology. Maybe it was a mistake on my expectation. I was expecting to know a little bit more about CodeParadise itself and what you are planning or already giving to your students. I mean, I guess students are not expected to use the server image, right? They are expected to work only on the browser. So you need a set of tools for them to work. What you have shown is just how to manage the slides from the server side. It's great technology, it's very interesting. I'm also interested in the application for students itself. Can you comment a bit on that?
Yeah, I'm still on. You can hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, okay. The thing is, I'm going to develop screens, so the tools, with CodeParadise, with what I have right now. So what I've shown here as the presentation is just one type of user interface. But the idea is to create presenters for your inspector, your system browser, and all those things, and have that in your browser. So at some point, there's no need to have this development environment running with its tooling on the server side. It will be just an empty, or not empty, of course, but it will just be an image with the headless tools. So there will be the inspector and the system browser, but it won't as a model and not as a view on the server side.
And students will have full access to the client image running on Squeak.js, right? The idea is to show them all that image, all the Smalltalk environment, or just a subset of it.
No, well, what they will see is what I showed on the left-hand side, my server environment. That's what they'll be seeing. They won't see that there's an extra image running inside the browser. That's only sort of a convenient thing to be able to have a view, but they will see this Smalltalk image on the left-hand side, but through a display in the browser. So
I understand. So they will be exposed to the full Faro image.
Well, as I said, hopefully QS.
or quiz, yes, of course. Yeah. Okay.
And by separating the images, I'd like to have a very tiny application image. That's what you're working on. That's what you're building, and have a development environment in a separate image, and they'll work together. I haven't figured it out completely yet how I want to do that, but that would allow you to have one single development environment, which you can use for all kinds of applications you're working on, and have small images, and you can sort of spin up another image very easily then. And if an image isn't used, it will sort of go in hibernate mode or something. Again, I haven't thought it out completely yet. I've started working on CodeParadise with the idea of let's see what is possible and how far I get at first, and it's growing, and I'm really excited how well things are going. So it's something I haven't figured out yet. It has to come.
Perhaps you may be interested in what Hernan Wilkinson and his team is doing at the University of Buenos Aires and University of Quilmes. They are using a quiz image, but with a package they built that's called Quiz University, and their approach is at the first stage to hide classes from students. It's a pure object environment without classes, with a simplified environment that perhaps is better for a starter than a full Smalltalk image that has a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, one of the ideas with these separated images is that if you open up a browser, you would see the image, the classes installed in your application image, and you wouldn't necessarily also see the classes in your application development environment. And by doing that in such a way that also helps sort of focus on, and hopefully, again, the idea of that a single person should be able to understand the image. And I think that's part of, for me, the attraction to try to create these little images which sort of work together.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Can you show us what the first 5 minutes is like for a student or a newcomer?
Nope. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know yet. It's not that far in development. I'm really starting from the technology up because I wasn't sure I could pull it off at all. So no.
Yeah.
But idea, I can maybe, some idea would be that you would start with an example application. You wouldn't start from scratch, the other type of scratch. But you would have, for example, a little robot application, which you would start as an example, and there would be sort of a tutor or tutorial object helping you out. Say, okay, let's try to move this robot, and that you'll have to enter a send message to the robot in which you ask it to move forward and to make a turn, and then you will ask it to make a little square walk and those kind of things. So that's a bit of the idea of what I'd like to have at some point. So really small steps of trying out things.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
A couple of points from some ancient experience. A long time ago, Adele Goldberg and I did a project called Learning Works. So this is something one probably vaguely remembers. It might be worth the guys that you were talking about building the student university thing to take a look at some of the tricks we did there in information hiding. It wasn't so much hiding classes and stuff. It was, oh golly, it's so long ago that remembering even what we did is hard. It was sort of staged exposure. The earliest steps let you see some very simple things and do almost scratch-like stuff of saying, oh, display this block, make it bigger, make it rotate, make it move. And then as you gradually moved along, you got to see more and more of the tools and more of the details. So that was an interesting experience. And there are some articles scattered around the web on it. And
she also wrote a book with Kenny Rubin about it.
Yes, golly, yes, that was a long time ago. And then on just a small wave of the flag for Raspberry Pis. If anybody hasn't tried out running Smalltalk on a Raspberry Pi, I think almost every Smalltalk there is now available on the Pi, on Squeak obviously, so QS and Faro. VA Smalltalk is available for it, I think. I think Gemstone Smalltalk is too, actually. But it's worth mentioning that for your $50 for a Raspberry Pi 4 with 4 GB of RAM, you get roughly 30% of the performance of a high-end iMac for about 2% of the cost.
Yeah.
Which is kind of useful for students and kids.
Definitely. No, the idea of running one of these tiny images is that you can run a number of these images on one of those Raspberry Pis, because it takes very little memory. And so.
Yeah, one interesting example, Chris Muller has a distributed Smalltalk equivalent that runs quite nicely. And even on a 1 GB Raspberry Pi, so really quite constrained for memory by today's standards, you can run up one of his tests that spawns, I think, 6 images, does work with them, and then closes them down and so on. So on a 4 GB Raspberry Pi 4, I suspect, though I haven't tried it recently, that would run perfectly well. And of course you can, if you really need it, get Raspberry Pis with 8 GB of RAM these days.
Yeah.
So anybody interested in smallish machines should really give them a try out.
I have to run. Sorry, this is a bad time slot for me during the workday. But I want to thank you, Erik. And I missed the beginning of the talk. You're using SqueakJS in the headless mode, yes?
Yeah.
And so it's just that, and the whole UI is generated using Smalltalk, directly talking to the DOM?
Yeah, I've created 2 plugins actually, which do DOM manipulation event. It receives events and creates Smalltalk objects representing these events. So the Smalltalk is handling the events from there on. And
so it's SqueakJS plugins, not the JavaScript bridge?
Yeah, SqueakJS plugin.
Oh,
so
okay. I will look at that.
I'm not wrapping. I'm not using a JS bridge. I'm not wrapping JS code. And I'm not planning on allowing or using JavaScript libraries. I want it to be real Smalltalk, and it's easy to sort of get into using JavaScript. But then at some point, JavaScript will shine through again. I want to sort of prevent the unknown people from touch
I like it. Cool, thank you. I have to go, sorry, but
nice to see you.
Bye everyone. Bye.
Bye. Cheers, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, thanks everyone. And this sounds like a good place to stop the recording. So before
sorry, I interrupt you. Maybe you can give us 5 more minutes for additional questions and discussion, or
Sure.
Are you out of time?
No, we got all the time in the world. Just if there are no more questions related to the presentation, and we want just to span off.
No,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah,
you can hear you.
So I have a question. What's the access to the DOM from the server image? So what if you want to use different JavaScript libraries, special features, devices, libraries for handies, for example, for mobiles, these platform-dependent code, how do you access that from the server Smalltalk?
Well, 2 things. First of all, from the server side, you can't access them. You'll have to, I didn't show that explicitly, but you'll be installing client behavior. That's like some code you're going to install into the client image that will do the access to, and you'll be commanding it from the server environment. And secondly, I'm for my ideas, I'm probably going to write an extra plugin to do music, or maybe web GL for some graphics stuff. But I'm not going to add general features to allow all kinds of JavaScript code. You have that. SqueakJS has a JS bridge. I think Greg has made it. Right?
Yeah, I'm doing mashups at the wazoo with that thing. Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at Caffeine, you will see all kinds of neat things happening with existing JavaScript code. So Craig has done a lot of work there. You could use that, but it's not something I want to use in my setup. So of course you can add it to the application if you'd like, but it's not what I'm anticipating. I might anticipate, like you mentioned, mobiles. For example, changing orientation on a mobile phone is a regular event, so it would be able to incorporate that in the current way of working. It's not there at the moment, but I could add that into the event handling code, which will be JavaScript, but will result in Smalltalk objects and handling in Smalltalk code. Does that answer your question?
Well, partly. So I think, so that you mean you have to implement JavaScript on the client to access them as Smalltalk objects from the server. So that means you need a wrapper for each library. That seems awkward. So you have two different places where you define behavior. This is problematic. So I would rather go the way to do much more on the client. So
no, but you're not doing anything on the server. You just need, you can't execute code itself accessing something which isn't there. So the server has to send messages to the client. The client will execute the code to access some kind of library or whatever. Yes,
but you have to define the code somewhere. In the server, you will define the code, which is sent to the client to be executed.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and if you have JavaScript libraries, you need for each library a wrapper to wrap this low-level JavaScript code in Smalltalk classes.
If you do it sort of my way, yes. If you do it Greg Latter's way, you'll be using the JS Bridge, which is a more general wrapper. So it would allow you to access all kinds of properties and methods of a JavaScript library without additional code. It's all in this JS Bridge plugin, right, and the classes from that plugin.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yep. Thank you. I see Florin has got a question.
Yes. Right. Yes. Hi. So, you know, I share your a lot of your design purposes, and I agree that we should work in just one language and preferably Smalltalk. But in your demo, it was clear that it was not just Smalltalk, but it was Smalltalk plus heavy-duty HTML. So there's at least two languages. One of them is pretty horrible, I think, HTML. And obviously, I mean, you're very fluent in it, so maybe you don't even realize it, but I think that is quite a burden. So even if only for that perspective, I think if HTML would be wrapped in maybe JavaScript or whatever, something that can raise the abstraction level so you can deal with it a little bit more easily, I think that would be worth it. Because, okay, I'm saying JavaScript because I don't think you want to necessarily build everything in Smalltalk to create a nice library for manipulating DOM and doing HTML. There are presumably some libraries already that do that. But for that perspective, I think that would be worth doing rather than directly HTML.
Okay, well, it's on one hand it's an obvious choice, an explicit choice to use HTML in cascading style sheets, because that's what the browser offers. So that's there. It's yes, it's another language, you might say, but defining graphics in some way requires a sort of language, be it an API language or a descriptive language like HTML and CSS. So that's a choice. One option could be, and I haven't looked into it yet, would be to have drawing primitives which would create the user interface. And then you would render everything just using drawing primitives like you have currently in all kinds of images with the BitBlit, the pixel kind of, or more like QS has vector graphics. By the way, now Pharo is also going into vector graphics as well. And you could use those kind of APIs to create your user interface. That could be as well. Well, yeah, I personally, that's true. I don't mind having HTML wrapped in web components and adding onto existing components. At some point, there's really nice Lego blocks we can use. You don't have to know all the little details about cascading style sheet or HTML.
Have you become familiar with canvas graphics in HTML5?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Yeah, yeah. So that's one of those. Well, you could wrap that and make an API for drawing on the canvas, for example, or WebGL directly. Yeah.
Following up on Florian's question, how do you debug things in your client?
Well, you could see I tried to send this nonsense message to the client, and it came back with an inspector at the moment, but it's actually returned on the server environment as an error, and normally that would require a debugger to be shown, but the debugger would not show on the server side. Of course, it would just be another view which is presented in the client side. So yeah, there you would see, and if it's in the client, sorry, in the view class, if there's an error in one of the view classes, that would mean there will be a debugger on your tiny image which is running in the browser itself. That's something probably to get your head around if you're new to this whole thing. So that might be a little tricky, but that's the whole idea. It just should be a debugger which you can then use to debug your code, and the code will be in the server side because that's where it originated, of course, but it'll be executing. So the stack trace, the contexts you will see in the debugger will be from the client environment itself. So this will be the case where your model will actually be on the browser and not inside the server, which is the normal location for your model classes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further question on CodeParadise?
Yes. You said, Erik, that you could not serialize block closures. I just wanted to, sorry for the noise. Oh gosh.
Go ahead.
That's cool.
It's cool, we can hear you.
Yes, I muted myself for a second because a motorcycle was making a loud noise on the street. Yeah, well, I just wanted to tell that Quiz can serialize almost any block closure, including those that access outer variables and instance variables and all the stuff. The only closures that cannot be serialized are those that do non-local returns because there's nowhere to return to, or those that do sub%. And I didn't implement sub% because I didn't need it, and I thought it would not be something that would be used much, but it could be done. But any other closure can be serialized. You can take a look at Quiz. In block closure, we have a category object from disk, as in old Squeak, and it creates an instance of a serializable block closure that is a regular Smalltalk object that holds all the state that you need, and that can be serialized, and that can compile itself on the other image. You need a compiler for that to work. Yeah. Because it creates a regular Smalltalk object without the closure variable information and source code to access them. So yeah. If you have a compiler, you can use that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's not going to be a compiler I think there's no need for a compiler in the client image. The client image will do very little things actually.
Well, something else that could be done, if you really wanted to serialize block closures, you can take what I did for quiz, and instead of taking the source code and recompiling it, just compile it and keep the bytecode, okay? Yeah, and move there, and move that. Mm-hmm. And it should be possible to make that work.
Yeah. Currently already, like I showed the animator. The animator, there's a block, of course, but it's already inside a method. So it's already sent over to the client environment when serializing the method. So there's blocks on the client environment. They're there. You just can't send at the moment a block closure as part of a message send. I can't send a select with a block closure to the client environment, but it doesn't seem as a necessity to have such a...
well, sometimes you need sorted collections, right?
Yeah, but sorted collections I can have on the client side. I mean, there's collections there and I can have blocks, but I'm not sure if it's logical to ask the... that's what you mean, probably. You want to have the sort block sent. Yeah. You have to put it in a class already, because you'll have to install some kind of client behavior. There's one class you'll be sending to the client environment which will sort of start things up. You have to have something to get going. Otherwise, it's just the client environment which will install code. But
it's only for serializing and replicating on the client and a sorted collection that you already have on the server, an instance. Just for that. Of course, you can create new ones in the client, but you cannot serialize. You need the closure for that. But if you ever happen to need that, take a look.
It's true. Thank you. Yeah. Point taken. Point taken. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. So let me start the video. I think we are now. There's a couple of comments that I want to read, since the Christian's audio is not working. Is mentioning about HTML libraries. I'm using and being very fond of Silk, a number framework.
Yo, I'm online.
Really nice and very readable, very small talkies.
Yes.
Okay, it looks like you can talk now, so if you want to.
No, I think it was Torsten who said he doesn't have audio.
I switched on my audio, so can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, Torsten is saying you can port Silk if the license allows, and the problem with Amber is that it just transpiles, so it just mocks a Smalltalk, but it is mapping to JavaScript all the time.
Yes.
So for example, 200 factorial will not work in Amber due to the limit of JavaScript.
Yeah.
In comparison, Squeak.js is a full Squeak Smalltalk virtual machine, and with the right abstractions such as DOM, CSS, WebGL, you don't have to use JavaScript.
Yeah. But the point is, Silk is extremely, well, a nice API, if you want to say. It's a very pleasant abstraction of all this HTML bullshit. And I have never seen any nicer, cleaner, simpler abstraction than that. So I'm sure the license is open, and I'm sure it's very easy to port. The really attractive part is, of course, that it runs directly in the browser. So you can have access to any browser facilities, any code which is loaded, or you can load it yourself. And so you can call all the JavaScript functions just like Smalltalk functions directly. So, and you are directly at the DOM. There's no client-server connection, nothing. There's no latency, it's direct. So if you want to look at it, I wrote a COVID cases tool with Ember, and I used Silk for all the HTML and all the stuff which goes on, which is quite complex. It is very, very beautiful. So the usage, It's very difficult to explain. So just take a look at it and see if you can use it for your Smalltalk, because it's a model. It's a beautiful model of HTML.
Yeah, I've seen it. You could port it if you like. You create.
No, I don't. I'm happy in Ember. No problem.
Okay. Well, then everyone's happy, I guess, because you really look happy with that solution. It's not my solution. I don't want to get near JavaScript. I really.
No. You have Smalltalk. It's a really good illusion of it.
If you're wrapping JavaScript, you have JavaScript. If something goes wrong in your JavaScript, you have JavaScript. You can't handle it. The thing I want is if I make a mistake, it's my Smalltalk debugger which shows me where I went off the path and what I should try to do to fix that. And that's a different approach.
Yes, of course, absolutely different. And I think Ember is the first glimpse of a new modern Smalltalk in the browser. So just let me explain for a minute.
Yeah, that's good. No, I don't agree, but yeah.
The Smalltalk we know, basically all the Smalltalk 80 descendants have the problem that they mostly deal with the screen. They're centered around screen, around tools on the screen, browser, inspector, debugger, what you work. And this is all very nice, integrated, super environment. But you want that on the client. You want that in the browser. You want to deal live with the DOM. You want to send the DOM some message and immediately things happen. No client-server communication, nothing, just direct. So that is the idea. The tools in Ember are really bad still. There's a browser. There's a really bad non-functional debugger. Inspector is okay. And the usage is different. You get used to it and then it's quite productive, but it's very different and not as good and not as refined as all the other Smalltalks. But it's web only. It's really web only. There's nothing of the old Smalltalks in there, nothing. So no screens, no all this stuff you need on a PC, like the different streams and low-level machine code stuff. Everything is not there. The machine code for that image is JavaScript, and that's nice. But so sometimes you look through, but usually you are just simple in your wonderful Smalltalk environment. You don't have anything else. This is beautiful. So, but of course you want to communicate with the server, and then your approach is great. So, but I would put the divide somewhere else. I would put much more logic in the client and have the server and the client communication as minimal as possible. It's nice to reload code, to add code to the client from the server or vice versa, but they should be as separate as possible and just communicate on a domain logical level. So that's my idea. So the client, the browser is the screen, the tools, all the UI you have always in Smalltalk. And yeah, that's the client. The server is data or objects. So, okay, but it's a different approach, but I think parts of them are part of the future of Smalltalk, and that's a cool thing.
All right. Okay, I think we should agree to disagree on what we prefer. So it's just a preference, probably.
Yeah, just trying. So I'm use this rather not so small app to just try it out, and so I wasn't sure if it's interesting, but I fell in love, and it's extremely beautiful to use. So that's what I just wanted to share. So
yeah,
try it out.
I tried Ember and I came to another conclusion, but it's free. We can
you can look at my code, for example. It's on GitHub. It's free for everybody, and you can see how I use it. And yeah, you will see no ugly HTML. You will see just a very direct way to define pages. Very, very good.
Christian, can you put a link to that in the chat?
Yeah, there's a link here. This UK Smalltalk corrected that. That's block Herbie SK post Silk is just too flexible.
Okay.
Oh, you mentioned GitHub though. Can you put the GitHub link in the chat?
Oh yes, I can do that.
Yeah, thanks.